Teaching English Radio India.
A radio series for teachers of English.
Brought to you by the British Council.
Welcome to the program. I'm Manisha Dak and I'm a teacher and a trainer. Today, our topic is about students working together to develop their English and become more independent of you, the teacher. We heard from teachers across India suggesting different ways that they do this. And here are just some who take part in this program.
Hi, I'm Neeta and I'm from Mangalore in Karnataka.
I'm Monica, I am from Delhi.
I'm Kalpana from Bangalore.
Hi, I'm Shefali from Trivandrum, Kerala.
I am Kadambari from Delhi.
One opinion all these teachers share is that we should encourage our students to take more responsibility for their learning.
Learners like to be independent, it's a very natural trait. And as students become adolescents, they want to learn things on their own.
Our students will one day need to use English in the real world without the help of the teacher. They need to learn to communicate in English. One way to encourage this is to let them work together some of the time in our lessons. As the National Curriculum Framework 2005 states, children learn in a variety of ways, both individually and with others. We need to introduce pair work and group work where the focus is not always on listening to the teacher. Let's hear some ideas from around India. We start in this classroom in Delhi with teacher Monica. She has been teaching prepositions and now she's getting her students to work in small groups to make their own sentences about what they can see around them.
They will learn about the prepositions through fun learning activity. They will enjoy this game because we will make different groups and there is a competition between them. And it will help them if they sit in groups, though they learn from each other.
Traffic, transportation, crowd, population, and
Delhi is changing gradually. There have so many industries.
As we can hear, they are very active. They are cooperating to find examples around them to make new sentences and doing their very best to use English together.
Making sentences has helped them to learn more. It's been successfully and they learn many things from each other.
Well, saved by the bell. There are many ways students can work together. With careful instructions, younger students can do a simple role play. Here is Kalpana explaining how she has set this up using a story from the textbook.
It's about the sick lion, and the lion is sick, and 3 doctors, animal doctors, come and visit him, and how each animal doctor will, treat the lion. That was the story. I set up a role play. I made the children act according to the persons in the thing, and each group had different ideas and they did the role play. I just explained to them, giving simple, clear instructions how they should go about the role play.
Given the chance to stretch their legs, to act a little, and to interpret a story, the children have great fun. The atmosphere that Kalpana creates means they feel safe to be creative with the little English they know. This kind of group activity is great for fluency. And here is Kadambari with another idea developed from a story in the textbook.
Give them the opening and then ask them how they expect the chapter would proceed from there. So if they're working in groups, we can have 5 to 6 stories or maybe even more number of stories from the group.
This involves groups of students discussing, writing, and later reading aloud to the class. Kadambari reads out the very beginning of a story, but then she stops. She asks the groups to decide what happens next. Each group must agree on a story and quickly write it up. The teacher walks around in the role of monitor and helps when they need it.
And then they can actually read out their stories in the class and then read the actual story, compare it with what they have written, look at different endings that can be there or how they can proceed with the chapters.
Many teachers like to break up lessons by introducing a range of short activities such as quizzes or games like 20 questions so that students are able to work together. No doubt you have similar ideas that provide useful practice and make students think for themselves in English.
You're listening to Teaching English Radio India, a series for teachers of English, brought to you by the British Council.
Today we are talking about how students can work together and become more independent. We have heard lots of classroom activities using pair and group work, but now let's think about how to make students more self-reliant. For example, we can get them to do more reading and listening outside of class, help them to keep their own record of new vocabulary, and show them how to use dictionaries, especially the English kind. Here is Kamini.
What I do is, at the beginning of the course, most of my students, they want to improve their vocabulary. So I strongly advise they need to maintain a vocabulary notebook and maintain a list of words. However, writing the word in the notebook is not enough. There needs to be a lot of other information with the word. So I equip my learners to use the dictionary. This is all about making the learners, the student, self-reliant and independent. So what I would do is, I would write down maybe 5 words on the board, make groups of students, allocate a word to a group. We could just think of 5 things the students could note down from the dictionary about that word, and that will help them remember the word longer, and they will be more confident in using it in their writing and their speaking. Students being independent means when they're out of the classroom, they should be able to do things on their own. They don't need to rely on anybody to get going when it comes to learning English, which means that they have enough tools in their bag to become more proficient in the language, and they are not reliant on just the teacher.
As well as getting our students to find out new words and how they are used, we should always encourage them to spot and correct mistakes for themselves. This is a great way to help them to keep on improving. We have talked about error correction in other programs. For example, Neeta said we shouldn't always rush in to correct mistakes, especially when students are speaking in class and expressing their ideas.
It just brings down their confidence and they are not able to speak up again in class. And I have seen that happening in classes. And what I follow is that I let it pass at that time and probably talk to the person later, telling them if there was some problem where the error was.
Neeta will wait until later for corrections, and then she encourages what is called peer correction so that students help each other.
The other way of doing it, in which I think works best, is when it's peer correction. When their classmates check them and tell them about the something which is not correct, then it works much better for them. And with due time, what I have seen is that they start self-correcting themselves, which is probably the best way of correction happening.
An easy way to get your students aware of correcting errors: write up some sentences that are correct along with some with errors. Ask your class to work in pairs and identify the ones that need to be corrected. Deena often uses peer correction for marking written work.
I think students correcting each other's work seems to me, more beneficial than just the teacher correcting the work, because it gives them a chance to think about the errors and think about how they can correct it. That gives the students a chance to correct each other's work and get better at what they're doing, thus raising their awareness of what they're learning.
After the students have tried peer correcting, the teacher may want to check some examples. What do you think of this approach? Higher level students can also be effective critics and comment on their fellow students' presentations. This needs careful managing, but if you can get the atmosphere right and the ground rules are clearly set out, then both presentations and writing can be effectively peer reviewed. The teacher can then check and give feedback afterwards. We continue with the subject of students working together and becoming more independent as learners. One way to do this is to set up activities where they need to do some research and then collaborate to show their results. Namita does this as a pre-reading exercise.
There's a chapter on Nelson Mandela. So in that chapter, what we do is we tell the children on the previous day that we are going to read about this, and they have to collect some information before coming to the class. So in that way, it also helps to build the lesson. With our pre-reading activity, we are actually covering a lot of what's going to be done in the chapter, because these kind of lessons, they have a lot of facts. And these facts, if they are already known to the child, it helps them realize the goal of reading the chapter also. And they feel involved.
Namita's suggestion involves students finding out information before they come to the reading in the textbook. Now, Shefali describes a follow-up project to a reading exercise about the rainforest.
I remember one activity we did in class as post-reading. This lesson was on rainforests, and the children read through it, and it was really, really dry text. But then after they read it, they came up with what they thought of a rainforest and put together postures of that. And there was a lot of involvement in it. So when I asked them to read it a second time, there was a lot of interest generated because it had become their own. Lots of them went home and took other books and read something about a rainforest and came back to class the next day. So that became an extended activity on its own without any input from the teacher, which turned out very well.
Both these activities involve some critical thinking, some research and collaboration, and a lot of independence from the teacher in collecting and presenting information. They also tie in closely with the work in the textbook, so they fit well with the teacher's lesson plans. There are so many other ideas to try, from small practical tasks young people can carry out together in English, like making something, to big projects like creating a class newspaper or an English wall. I'm sure that you'll have many ideas of your own. We talk more about a lot of these ideas in other programs, but for now, let's remind ourselves of some of the activities we have heard about today. To encourage our students to help each other, we need to get them working collaboratively in pairs and groups for at least some parts of each lesson. Students enjoy thinking for themselves and making up their own sentences after you have taught them some new grammar point. In groups, everyone can participate. Even younger students can do a role play or make up their own stories. You need to create the right atmosphere and help them by pre-teaching key language. Students at higher levels can be taught tools to be more independent, like keeping a record of new words, using the dictionary, and helping each other by peer correction and peer reviewing. Encourage independent reading. Get students to research an interesting topic before an activity in the textbook, or develop it afterwards into a project. The teacher needs to set these activities up carefully, but it's worth the effort as your students share ideas and knowledge and enjoy the process of becoming more independent. You know, after all, as teachers, it is our responsibility to help students use English in the future without us. We can't hold their hands forever. That's all from today's program in this British Council series for Teachers of English. Many thanks again to all the teachers who have joined us to discuss this topic. But now, from me, Manisha Dag, it's goodbye and enjoy your teaching.